Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Uncensored the CMO. Now, one team absolutely on fire at the moment is the Wieden+Kennedy team on McDonald's in the US. They've been producing some of the world's most effective, most fame-building work out there. Famous orders, as featured in, I'm sure you have seen it. So I'm over at the Wieden+Kennedy offices, catching up with Tass and Brandon, the team behind this campaign, to find out how they did it and just how effective it is and how it's driving business results. This is a really cool episode. There's so much to learn from it, and I know you're going to love it. Welcome to the show, gents.
Thanks, John.
Thank you very much.
Well, just for the audience to get to know you, I thought I'd start with a couple of questions for both of you just to kind of find out a bit about you. So, Tass, I understand you started your career at BBH in London. Is that right?
I did. Yeah, I spent the first 9 years there.
How does BBH compare to Wieden+Kennedy? Because all the debate about, London agencies versus New York agencies, what can you tell us about the difference between the two?
They were founded in the same year. So 1982, both stayed independent for a good 30 years until those guys sold out. But they put creativity at the top, right? I think, what was that first BBH belief? That the power of creativity and the primacy of the idea. So it's all about ideas. It's where I learnt my love for the creative product, for interesting people. But there is a difference in cultures. I think at BBH they talked about processes that liberate creativity, and here we're a bit scared of process. We're scared that process can get in the way of creativity. Over there, I think an interesting analogy was, I remember Bogle once said, I want us to be like consultants, right? We go in there, we're like McKinsey, right? Don't be, silly and stuff. Here, it's like, be stupid, ship of fools. I remember doing the first pitch, I did the Ford pitch, and I turned up wearing a blazer, and they laughed at me. They went, "Oh, Tass got a blazer on. Look at that. Oh, yeah." And they were all in hoodies and Nikes. And I went, "Oh, of course," because I think you were saying this with Heg, ironically, the other day. It's like creativity is what we're selling. That's all we have. And that's the only thing that clients can't do, right? So don't go in there looking like them. Go in there looking like that thing that they're scared of, but need. And that, and that's really the difference, I would say, the big difference.
Yeah, I love it as a client. I love going to agencies because you can kind of dress like them. So go, I'm going to be like the agency for the day rather than have to sort of wear the suit to turn up to the meeting with your customer sort of thing. Now, we're going to be talking in a minute about famous orders. So give me what would your order be for McDonald's?
Always been a Big Mac guy. So Big Mac, fries, and then strawberry milkshake for me, which always takes me back to going shopping with my mum when I was about 8 and she just wants to shut me up. That's for me, my order. It's
funny how it brings back memories, isn't it? Because chocolate milkshake for me was the thing. That was the naughty treat when I was a kid. And it went, now I've got daughters, they're teenagers, that's what they would have. And it just triggers that beautiful
That's our whole
memory.
Strategy. I'm sure.
Yeah.
We
will
we'll
come on to that, definitely. Okay.
Day.
Well, let me go to Brandon. So how did you end up here? And you've been at the agency for quite some time. So what is it that inspires you about the agency?
Well, I'm going to sound like a caveman after that speech from Tass. I started at Saatchi right out of college, and back then they hired us like 25 at a time. It was like you were in there like a freshman class, and they would give you this big speech about how half of you won't make it 2 years, a quarter of you won't make it 5. That was it was interesting though. Like we'd work on Procter & Gamble, General Mills, J&J, these big brands where you really learn the nuts and bolts of what it means to be an account person, how an agency works. But I think 90% of account people, their story is kind of the same, whether you're running a company or, still just 5 years in the business. The thing that was unique for me there that I think came naturally was working and relating with creatives. I think at a really young age, they were sending me up to the 18th floor to talk to the creatives, usually to give bad news. And I would kind of come down being like, yeah, sorted it. We figured it out. And I think it was just, I came up there with the right attitude, wanting to, not trying to be slick or sell and I think that kind of idea pushed me. Once I learned something about the business after being there for a few years, you start to get obsessed with, so how could I find my way into Wieden+Kennedy, which took me a long time to do. I couldn't get arrested here. I would have meetings with people that didn't know why they were there, or for jobs that had been filled weeks prior already and they just forgot to cancel it. But then once I snuck in here, it's it's unlike any other place on earth. And so it really has not been a chore to stay here this long.
I mean, we were talking about fun, weren't we? And how would you describe the culture and that makes it so special?
The one of the most interesting things about this place is it's filled with so many people that could feel like they were the most important person in the room. But no one in this entire organization feels like if the cover of the book came out tomorrow, they'd be on the cover. We're all lucky to be here because of all the work that preceded us. And I think that, people feel like at their best, they just hope they'd be a part of something, that they'd move something on the shelf over to be a part of this great history. And I think that's rare for any agency to feel there's that much reverence for what it means to be here. And I just don't think anyone feels like they're the most important person here.
That's so true. I mean, again, I've been a few other agencies between BBH and here. And one of the things that struck me when I got here, maybe a few weeks in, I kind of went, I hope we can say this, there are no dicks. Like, you just look around and go, there's just these massive egos. There are very talented people, but the ego is in the service of the agency, right? It's like everyone's in it together. And that is that really makes a big difference for the culture and the work.
And do you, I mean, what do you look for when you're hiring someone? It's funny you mentioned Saatchi & because so when I was at university, I decided suddenly, having done a finance degree, in my final year, I want to go into marketing and advertising, right? Which is a bit of a pivot. And I went down to the library and I dug out the Saatchi & application form.
I'm the same.
Really?
Well,
I think it's a superpower, actually. I love the hidden kind of finance kind of training. It comes
For me, it was like Greek parents pushing me into finance. Dad has a finance background, did 2 internships, wasted 2 summers, thank you, Chase Manhattan, and just couldn't feel it. I felt I was faking it. And I went to one talk. It was actually by Jeremy Bullmore, legend, rest in peace. And he said this one thing, and he said, we're looking for the kind of people that like reading every section of the newspaper. And for me, it was just that trigger. I tell this story now to young people. I go, look, you've probably not heard of a newspaper, but, bear with me here. But that was it. I was like, oh, there's a job for people like that. And like, that is it. That, I never had to fake it anymore.
That's I love that approach. When I got to the library, I dug out the Saatchi & application form. It was 25 pages, completely blank. I thought, that's so clever. Like, what do you fill it with? How do you decide?
I love that.
And do you fill it all? Do you fill none of it? I thought that's really genius.
Draw pictures.
Yeah. Is it pictures? Is it words? Yeah. How do you know what they want? How would you find out? I thought it's very interesting.
I think the brief for here, when we bring people in, it's quite often like depending on what the role is you're looking for, you are no longer looking for them to fill a mold. I mean, I think that's something we were all trapped in a decade ago. Now, you're looking at that person. What is the very specific thing that you're going to bring here? There is an alert, a filter we put on to be able to, will you work in this culture? Which means you cannot have an ego. Like, it doesn't work. And this place will reject you like a bad organ if you do. It just isn't room. But we look for, like, what is that thing that you're going to bring that no one else has? Because, you just don't want to hire mediocre. And I think that's the thing that I would say separates.
Now, talking about hiring, we must get into McDonald's, and let's start at the pitch. So what was the brief you guys got given right at the beginning of your relationship when we'll talk to me about the pitch. So how did you convince McDonald's to give you the account?
I mean, the brief was really simple. There was a great document, but in its essence, it just said, give us back some swagger. Like, the brand has lost its swagger. So they were very cognizant that, like, they were a bit beaten up. They'd spent too long listening to the haters and forgetting about the fans. And it was a long pitch. It was like a 9-month pitch. And I have to be honest, we openly tell this story. Like, the first half went terribly. And we had a global CEO presentation, and then we came out and clients fed back and they said, look, we're just a bit worried you don't really understand the brand. We're slightly concerned you don't even like it. And then the bit that really hurt, they went, we think you might be a bit too New York, a bit too Brooklyn. Basically, the work was too edgy, too out there, too weird. And so we were like, okay. They go, we're from the Midwest. So we said, all right, you know what? Whether it's just some pitch theater, at worst, it would just be some pitch theater. At best, we could actually uncover something. I said to my boss at the time, why don't we just do this road trip? I'm going to do a road trip from Chicago to Atlanta. We quickly worked out, you could drive in Utah for a week and not leave the state. But Chicago to Atlanta gives you the beef eating Midwest, the chicken eating Southeast. You can do 6 states in about 7 days. So it gives you the most sort of bang for your buck. And so we just went out there, me and a actually an intern. That's a whole other story. But she joined Janae, and we just hit the road. And we started by meeting people in McDonald's, obvious place to start. But we quickly found, if you're in McDonald's for lunch, you want to be in and out. You don't want to spend an hour and a half talking to us. So we just broadened it out. We talked to mums in Walmart. We went to fine dining restaurant, ended up in the kitchens with a chef. My favorite one is we went to church in Alabama. We broke into a rock convention in Louisville and talked to some rockers. But each one started telling you personal anecdotes, right? The rockers, they're like, of course, McDonald's on the road. I see those arches. We go, oh, of course. The mum in Walmart, her eldest, who was, I think, 8, 9, he quickly said, I don't get a Happy Meal anymore. I'm a quarter pounder person. And we go, oh, it's like you graduate from the Happy Meal. So we came back, we processed all these things, and we realized like all these personal anecdotes, there was so much power in them. We then called those fan truths, and that literally has been the heart of the strategy. We wrote a book of them. Literally, here's the book of fan truths. And so when the clients came back, maybe a month after the last meeting, we said, look, we took your feedback to heart. You said you don't understand the brand, worried a bit to New York. Okay, well, look, and we had it up on the wall. We had the book of fan truths. And we said, we think this is your brand. These are your fans. These are your customers. Could be product truths about eating the bit of cheese on the wrapper, stealing fries. It could be experience truths, golden lights and midnight salvation when you're drunk and, you see the thing. It could be anything, right? And they looked at it and they went up to it and they went, no one's ever done this before. Which again just seems so obvious. So and then that was it. We really have not looked back.
I would have to say, most of my career has been client side, and showing that you understand the brand. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? I mean, it sounds so basic. I mean, Richard Warren, who came on the podcast a few months ago, he's done client and agency. So he literally went from being the agency to being the client now, which is quite ironic. And he was pitching for Halifax, which is kind of a regional bank in the UK. And he decided to go down to one of their local branches. And I think he kind of presented the creative idea to sort of Brenda, the manager in Halifax, and filmed her response. And actually what he did is he played that back in the pitch meeting and said, that's how your staff feel about the ad we want to make for you. And as a client, it's really hard to, if that's what your, frontline staff think about it, you've nailed it, And I think so bringing in the audience, I think it's like, must be like top tip for, winning over a client.
That's our number one filter. And you see this on slides and Cannes and stuff. Do real people care? That's all that matters, and unfortunately this industry, not going to go on around, often you forget the real people. You think about the industry people. You think about, you forget that like, yeah, you end up making work for the industry versus work for real people.
100%. I mean, we're not the customer, are we? I mean, that's what we always forget. You are not the customer. Now, so this is, am I right with this? About 4 years ago, you win the pitch, and then what happens?
Well, I mean, the early wins were good because we put that strategy to use very quickly. The first thing we did was for Quarter Pounder, and I think this was where you want to get into that idea of that fan, letting the fans do your speaking for you is an element of pride for this brand that I think they weren't showing for a really long time, And I think the first thing we rolled out was this Quarter Pounder fan club where like we have these candles that you light all 5 of them for all 5 ingredients of a Quarter Pounder, and it smells like a Quarter Pounder. That takes a lot of, trust in how consumers or fans might react to that, and it's a kind of a weird way to launch something, it's a little out of the ordinary, and fans loved it. And I think that reaction really gave us a lot of confidence. The second thing that happened in that campaign was the first time we used Brian Cox, which was not necessarily our choice to be the voice of the whole brand at the time. That was our first thing out the door. But if you think about where he was at that point in time, that was right as Succession, I think, was sort of peaking. If you think about the pride that comes with someone like him saying, talking about beef or onions or cheese, he's essentially saying a Quarter Pounder with cheese is delicious. Fuck off, that's where he's coming from. And I think that's a bit of a happy accident. I think that his voice turned into such a confidence for the brand, which is one of the main reasons we ended up saying, okay, he's going to do absolutely everything. And
onions. Him saying onions yeah. is one of my favorite.
Yeah.
I should add as well. So we told you about fan truths is the heart of the creative strategy, but a big part of that is also the voice. We talk a lot about voice at Wieden. The voice is fan to fan. So we say, again at Wieden, your voice is your belief plus your tone. So the belief that we have is that there is a McDonald's fan in everyone. You know, whether you're a lapsed fan, a super fan, you know, a new fan, that we have the potential to be a fan. And then the tone is fan to fan, right? One fan speaking to another. Even when that's the brand speaking, we always go, is that fan to fan or is it brand to fan speaking down? And what that means is it's so human, it's true, it's personal. There's a great Wieden quote, you know, the best advertising is a conversation between two people overheard by everyone else. And fan to fan is really the embodiment of that.
That's beautifully put. Now, there was a rather small event, wasn't there, that impacted the world just after you started working, of course, COVID or the pandemic. And I was looking on the System One database at the scores of your creative for the last few years, and may surprise you to find out the best performing ad that you've made, as voted by the public in terms of their response, was actually your COVID response ad. So I'll give you the scores. So we mark the every campaign out of 1 to 5 star, 5 star being the best and 5 star putting in the top 1%, right? And in fact, we have to go into decimal places because everyone started going, oh, is it a good 5 star or a bad 5 star? You know, am I above them? Anyway, so we actually take it to 5.9. So 5.7, which actually was the 6th. We, rather crazily, during COVID, we tested every ad around the world that had COVID because we had a bit of spare capacity. Because no one was advertising or testing or advertising. So we had a bit of time on our hands. We thought, I know, we're going to test every COVID ad and just write some guidance about how to get it right. And what I love about this campaign is you absolutely nailed it. So as I say, it came 6th out of 600 or so, 5.7 stars, which is brilliant. But what's amazing about it is that because of the brand and because of the fandom you talked about, when you came out with that, and I know the execution varied based on country and the circumstances in, but it almost signaled the start of return to normality. And it also showed a lot of generosity. But to explain the campaign for those that might not be familiar with it, because it's really quite powerful.
Yeah, so that one, I mean, that was when we were giving away meals to first responders. And I think this is as good of an example as anything to talk about the power of the McDonald's system. Because when we talked about doing that, first of all, the capacity that it takes to fund it, to train the crew how to do it, and to also to think about just the process of someone coming to get a free meal, how do you prove they're a first responder? I mean, that's a lot that goes into it.
I hadn't thought about that, actually.
Yeah.
They're going to come in uniform.
And I think, but the most important part of that was we wanted to give it to them in a Happy Meal box. Because that was just something that was a touch that would make people feel more special. And again, even that presents complications. Like adult food's not meant to fit in that. So we were breaking all kinds of rules, but the system pulled it off. What they do, once we sell an idea, what they go do after it is 10x what we do on our side. But that was all about trying to figure out what is our purpose, what is our reason for being. And for first responders, we are quite often their easiest, quickest thing to get. And so how can we find our way in there to do that again? And God, I think we gave away 10 million meals. Yeah.
To your point about the system, I think we had a really small idea initially, like, let's give them free coffee. And they went, no, that's not enough. Let's give them free meals. We can make it happen. And they did it in about 2 or 3 weeks, I think.
But that generosity, that's what we noticed in all our testing, is that any brand that was showing how much they cared and actually being generous was, the response was amazing. I mean, in the UK, we had queues, long queues. It was on the national news, like the queues outside. The moment that, at 6 a.m. on the day it was that McDonald's reopened.
The Mac is back.
Mac is back. And there were long queues, people couldn't get out of the car park again. It was just carnage because it kind of signaled that pent up, desire to get back out and, have a McDonald's.
If there's ever an advertisement for the power of brand, I mean, that was it.
It was.
Another part of that too was one of the executions in that campaign was to feature childhood pictures of first responders at McDonald's and then have them flip over to then reveal, their current state as first responders. And when you look at that and you're like, how many of these exist? And we had way more than we could use. That just finding, not just people, but first responders, as a kid at a birthday party at McDonald's. So we found more than we could use, it's again, power of the brand.
Yeah, you're tapping into something very cultural out there that, everyone's got a story, everyone's got a memory, and it's all quite powerful, isn't it? Well, talking about orders and first orders, famous orders, I should say, famous orders, first responder, famous orders, get it right way around. Talk to me about that campaign, because that was quite special, wasn't it? And was it launched around the Super Bowl? Because that's when certainly I came across the famous orders?
The first iteration of it, I'll do
you do the ad.
The first iteration of it was the famous trays, which was Super Bowl right before COVID. So, I think two interesting things came from that. One, that was famous trays. So that was just shots of trays with the names of the people on the meals. And, but it was the first embodiment of no matter how big or famous you are, everybody has a McDonald's order, which is, a truth that has now been taken and done in a number of different ways. But that particular one, the most interesting thing that came out of that was that Kim K dips her nuggets in honey. That was all that was, as great as the execution was, that's all that people were talking about. And that showed that it was as much about the food as it was about the celebrity. It was as much about, fan reactions to that as it was about the execution or the craft. And I think it was not what we thought was going to take it home. We thought it would be much more about the artistry of the music, things like that. But that became what it was. And I think we took away that there is a fan interest in this idea, and that whatever we put out, and this will happen in many of our subsequent campaigns, it won't be the thing you think they're going to do. They're going to take something else. But it quickly moved into something bigger in 2020.
I thought the genius thing about the idea there is before, McDonald's might advertise the Happy Meal or the new salad or something like that. And then, but you're limiting the potential of it, right? And then you can go, well, let's advertise the Big Mac or Quarter Pounder. And that broadens it. But actually, if you're advertising what's your McDonald's, that's everybody, right? So everyone's got their favorites.
One of our main clients, JJ Heelan, she likes to say the great thing about the Travis Scott meal, and I'll get onto this, is that it's on the menu the whole time. It's not like it was there for a month and it's gone. Like if you want to go and eat like Travis, you can do that, or like Kim or whatever. You can go there now and get a Quarter Pounder and bacon. And so I've talked about Travis. I'll introduce him more properly. So as Brandon said, that was February. We did the Super Bowl spot. Then, like you said, the world went kind of nuts. We ran lots of messaging we blew up the calendar for a start. So everything we had planned, or they had planned, this was only about 6 months in for us, we got rid of. And it was messaging, we're open, the drive-thrus are open, the lobbies are closed, stay safe. Then we started talking about the food a bit more. And then the CEO came with a brief and said, look, in Q4 this year, I want to invest in marketing, and here's your brief. What would you do? We want a brand platform. We want to drive sales. We build the brand, but also drive traffic. And we came back. When you have such an open brief, we came back with a lot of wild ideas. That's what happens at Wieden. We had introducing crazy products, the Big Mac muffin, which is two muffins stacked together. We were going to do what's that thing in Dakota?
The
Mount Rushmore of McDonald's products. Anyway, in the end, after a few rounds of feedback going, I think this isn't it, we went back to the Super Bowl idea and we said, hang on a minute, what if we just took the order, one of those many orders, and just launched it for real and said, you can come in and get the Kim K, the Kanye, the whatever. And they loved that idea. And then we worked out who's the right person, and Travis Scott, bubbled up in terms of appeal to our target, in terms of just general dynamism, but most importantly, just love for the brand, right? Like we don't work with any talent that doesn't have, and if you're a celebrity, that love for the brand should really exist out in the world, right? If you haven't been snapped at the drive-through with getting McDonald's or with a bag of fries or with a Coke, then you're probably not a fan, because the number of photos that exist of celebrities. And then what working with a fan means is they really care about it. They're not just, they're not just shilling the product. They have their own personal memories. And for Travis, it was like, I've got the same order since back in Houston, and then he wants to design merch that like his experience, his interpretation, his memory. And then you're on a winner, basically.
It's a bit like the old advice. It's much better to let someone else tell your story than you tell it.
I love it.
That's a really good example of that, isn't it? That's very, very powerful. So how did the campaign do? I mean, obviously, it's exciting. You got lots of celebrities involved. How did it perform?
It went nuts. So when we launched the Travis Scott meal in October 2020, remember, it was still, COVID was everywhere. It's almost like people have been starved of an experience out in the real. One of my planners said it was like a concert that you could, it was the closest you get to a concert at the time. People start framing the receipts, the Travis Scott meal. That's like framing the ticket stub to your experience. And yeah, we had lines around the block. That was our version of lines around the block. We had, we'd said in the ad, Travis had said, "Tell him Cactus Jack sent you." That's his nickname. And then the young people start filming TikToks, and they just innovated on that. They start playing his song, turning up, playing song. Or once it became a snowball of its own, they said, "You know why I'm here," and then that became the call to action. McDonald's sent a training to their staff saying, if someone turns up, either plays music or says, "You know why I'm here," it's a Travis Scott, and they're like, "We don't need to train him. We know why they're here." And yeah, I mean, they sold out. They sold out of beef. They sold out of Sprite, and they sold out of lettuce. Like that's when we saw the real power of this brand.
I think one other thing that came from that was one of the things we did the first time we had done that for a campaign was we made T-shirts for the crew. So every crew member got a Travis Scott meal T-shirt. Vicky Chancellor, who was the head of owner operators at OpNat, she told us the story. It's one of the first times she had seen her crew wear their uniform home. Normally they change before they head out, because there was a pride. Again, it was that idea of pride. It was, as much as we were talking about it for fans of the brand, for the crew as well. That was something they had not seen before. Which again we just started to learn more and more about what will work, and
that's the interesting thing. Sometimes we forget, don't we, in our kind of roles, is that actually you've got a number of stakeholders. You've got the franchisees whose businesses are affected by, in this case, COVID and the recovery, right? You got the staff again, and they want to feel pride in what's going on. So it engaged everybody, didn't it?
100%.
I mean, we often talk, don't we, in our kind of circles about ideas that affect culture. But this is actually an idea, isn't it? A campaign that actually has got into culture and both, reflected back by using the celebrities you've used and really made a difference, hasn't it?
When we saw a video of someone stealing the point of sale poster, that was not something
that should be a KPI in a brief, right? This is so good.
No, we have those
the menu
KPIs.
card.
There's another one that, again, when we write effectiveness papers and stuff, you can have the brand tracking, but more important for us is all that reaction within the fans. Fan art is one that we saw with Travis, and then we've kept seeing repeated. Like the idea that young people, just Google Travis Scott fan art online. The idea that a young person can spend their day designing something that is basically branded art. It's like a unofficial advert for McDonald's. That's because you've touched something there that they really care about.
Now, you talked about effectiveness. I think you won Effie's, didn't you? Walks Brand of the Year as well, IPA as well. What were the financial results for McDonald's off the back of the campaign?
Got to be careful what we can publicly talk about.
Or what's in the public domain that you can talk about?
I'm trying to remember what's public. The public domain is that the famous orders campaign. So we did three others, right? Within 12 months. Did BTS, we did Travis, we did J Balvin, and we did Sweetie, right? Those combined drove incremental sales of $283 million, right? So that is the headline result. In terms of Romy, they all had about 8 times the average Romy. So it was, I think those are both public domain.
Really some good day's work then.
Yeah, yeah.
Well done. Now, one of the other things that struck me about the campaign as well, we talk about long and the short of it, don't we? And how they do different things. But I guess a really good example of where investing in fame-building advertising actually can have an immediate response as well. Because from what I understand from the case studies, that the response pretty much happened from day one of the campaign, didn't it? And continued. So it's a good example of being able to do both at the same time.
That was something we talked about in the brief. So when the client said, we need it to build the brand long-term and drive sales short-term, I went, look, I'm a big Field and Binet guy. I go, look, guys, that's asking a lot, right? We either do one or the other. And they're like, look, we have to do both. CEOs wants it. But we've realized, you know what? At least with a category like QSR, you probably can do both. That is now the bar we set ourselves, because it is, it's a low cost, high frequency, low effort thing to purchase. It's not like a car. I wouldn't put brand and sales every time with a car. And so you can do it, with the right idea. And so everything we do has brand and sales in it, because even something that's a very transactional acquisition-based campaign, you can still have the brand in there. And so that's how we see it.
One of the if I can say it like this, one of the surprise campaigns I saw from you guys is As Featured In. It was one of those ones that just took off and everyone was talking about. And to describe, tell me where the idea came from, and then describe it for anyone listening that can't watch. What that campaign is all about.
Well, so that one began with, if thinking about all of the different places that McDonald's has organically showed up in films and TV shows, all, since I guess we started in the 80s, we started looking for them. And so, the idea for that is to think about, this is what has McDonald's role in all of those films be? Like, what is the connective tissue? Why is something like that important? Because really the execution, the film, the craft of it is really just figuring out the right way to string them all together. But I think the idea quickly became, okay, so why would people care about that? But really, it builds from the same truth of no matter how big or famous you are, it builds from that same truth that what McDonald's role in that, it's a uniter, it's something that can make us all feel down to earth, no matter what type of role it's being used. So we pulled that all the way through from the films, from the TV shows, Coming to America, The Office, things like that. But then all the way through even to the packaging, where the McDonald's bag that had been featured in different things, that was the hero. The Big Mac, that was the hero. So it was just as important as any star in that movie, similar to the way Travis and the brand, just as important. So it was bringing that insight to life in a way that we had already organically done, not placing ourselves, all done just by the purpose of the filmmaker.
I mean, it tested on the system database insanely well. Everyone knew it was McDonald's. I think it's like 98% or something like that. I think that's another 5-star ad. And what it did, I thought very cleverly, was that you kind of, it didn't matter what kind of films you're into. There's something for everyone, isn't it? In there, the celebrities, and loads of the feedback we got on the reports was, oh, I never realized McDonald's was in so many kind of famous movies. So it kind of did a bit of social proof, didn't it? In terms of, showing the kind of company you keep.
I like the comment. I was pleased you guys posted it. I'm pleased it scored well. And I like that comment. I was going to say something about fame. I mean, I would say if you look back on the last 4 years, the two key ingredients to this story, this successful story, is fame and memories, right? Memories is at the heart of fan truths, right? You're tapping into existing memories and you're creating new ones, right? And you're building those memory structures. So we all know that's how advertising works. And then fame, as again, IPA fans, emotional advertising is more powerful than rational advertising. Fame work has an even higher multiplier. So that fame multiplier, again, we're privileged. We work with McDonald's, right? It's very hard to get, your small sort of detergent brand to occupy the same space in people's heads. But fame is part of that, right? Fame, finding the right ways to insert the brand in culture that then means that people want to talk about you, want to post you, want to wear your merch, want to create fan art, want to take your packaging. The BTS one, the bag was like a textile, and that was a global one. People all over the world were making like sneakers out of it. We're making stationery. This one lady made a bra. I don't know if I can say that, but a nugget holder. But like that's fame, right? That's when and you see the multiplier. So again, they have an amazing ROMI model. All clients should have a real robust ROMI and effectiveness model, but they can track the percentage of sales from earned media, and we saw it with Travis. Travis was 10 times the average. And that's free. That's free ROMI. That's kind of infinite because the cost was zero. All those famous orders campaigns, Cactus Plant, Grimace, which recently had 20 times the. And that's when you know that, again, fame is the multiplier.
I mean, you talked about, you might be a small detergent brand versus a McDonald's brand, but I think what you've done very cleverly is understood what the brand means to people. And I think that's the power. So in a way, it doesn't matter what brand you're working on, but you've gone to really understand it and understand the role it has in culture and how to unlock that. And you've unlocked in a very consistent way.
And there's a risk in that too, because when you understand what this brand, especially as we are putting so much of it in the hands of fans, the way that these campaigns come to life, one of the things you are risking, in much the same way you saw with Kim K and all that kind of stuff, you are not certain what is the thing they will grab onto. But Grimace, for example, the idea that campaign, that the TikTok trend was what drove so much of its relevance. That wasn't necessarily part of the plan, but like a lot of the ingredients were there to give fans that control, because so much of what we say is that, I give JP, John Petty, a lot of credit for putting the words to this, which is like our work. You have to let fans find themselves in the work. You have to let them find a way to make it their own. And any interaction is, additive. Any interaction, a share, a repost, or whatever, anything is additive to it. And I think that is that model that says we put a lot of the ingredients out there and see where they'll go with it. But that's because we have the trust in the fans. And some of them go better than others, but yeah.
It creates an interesting question, actually, from a client point of view. Because if you're presenting a finished film, right? As a client, I can go, okay, that's brand guidelines and, no one's going to complain about it, right? But what you've created there, you're kind of letting go of your control of the brand, aren't you? And letting the fans, basically.
You've put your finger on it, exactly. I don't think we've said share the pen yet. It's something we usually say pretty early. But that's, again, from Travis, from everything we've done, is relinquishing some of that creative control. And that's the brand doing it. The clients have to be comfortable doing that as well, and they have been comfortable because they've been amazing clients. So there's a great example. This isn't visual. Maybe we'll send you the slide. There's the merch we designed when we did Travis, and our designers are amazing designers, but they followed the brand guidelines to the letter. We showed it to him and he went, "No, that's lame. I'm not going to wear that. No one's going to wear that." I've done some designs of our own and they broke all the guidelines, the logo use, the colors, we showed it to the clients and they went, "Oh, we can't do that." We went, "No, I know this is asking a lot, but you know what? They saw the value in it. They saw the authenticity and they got it through legal and those designs went out and they sold out instantly and they were reselling straight away." And that again, with every campaign, it's like, how can you relinquish some creative control? How can, as Pratt was saying, how can you bring people into it? Don't agonize over every detail. Just put those ingredients out there and then hope that some of them, take off.
It's a bit that's feedback for clients as well, isn't it? To relinquish a little 100%. Bit of control and
give them all the credit for figuring out a way to make that happen.
So what was your advice to a client be, or can you describe what works about the relationship you have with McDonald's that allows this kind of creativity to flourish? And
it all goes back to the way we found ourselves at the table during COVID, because, we established this relationship at a time when no one knew what to do. And, quite often I think brands bring Wieden in to solve all their problems and we can act like we know how to do that some of the time, but we didn't know how to solve all these problems. So I think we learned very early on to be really honest with each other about what we knew, what we don't know. But it created a culture of saying yes that they started very early on. And they walk in to a meeting with us and want to make something and want to do something. It's not about if. And I think when you start to when you approach it that way together, the level of trust of not thinking like, are they going to like it? Are they not going to like it? The trust is there. The action is there. Like they've proven that time and time again. So it's like we just hold nothing back, and it's a very.
How do you sustain it? Because I know I've been in situations where I've been in that place where, actually it's interesting you talk about a crisis, because I think probably the closest I've been to what you described is when I was on LucasAid with the Grey team. We were in a complete crisis, and it meant we had to get out there, get out of the office and get down to meet our consumers and really understand it, get into what does the brand mean. And I remember when the ECD pitched the creative platform, it was just on a post-it note. There wasn't some big song and dance, but because we'd spent so much time together, like I knew it. When I saw a post-it note, I'm like, that's it. But that's so you have to really work at that and protect it, don't you? Because that equally can start to lose that quite quickly if you're not.
I think one of the big misconceptions too about Wieden, and I find this all the time when people show up on day one, they think that they're going to be issued weapons to go fight for the work and at all costs defend the work. And it's a complete misconception. It's quite the opposite. We care so much that our partners like it. We really want them to like it. All we want for them is to see what we see in the work. It's not about to get them to buy it or to make it. It's to get them to see what we see. And I think when that gets proven over time, you don't ever find yourselves in a position where you're making them do anything they don't want to do. I think they've trusted us in some times where they were uncertain, but I think we've shown enough times that we want them to like it and we want them to be comfortable with it, that we've had to only push them a handful of times on things,
It's more like hand holding. Sometimes we need to hold hands and go into this together. That scares us a bit, but it's never like trying to force something that they don't want. And now, I mean, again, it helps when you get some wins under the belt. The CEO in the US, when we see him, he goes, "Guys, you haven't scared me enough. Scare me more. I want to be scared." And like that's a great brief. Yeah. So again, that comes with trust when you're taking these leaps together.
And I mean, you talk about saying yes together as well and failing hard together as well. So like, have you ever been in a position where it's not worked? I mean, we're talking about the stuff that's working, right? But what happens when it doesn't work?
There's an example. There was some work that we had before COVID happened, right? That was planned for. And the first campaign Pratt described, QPC went great. But the second one was a Big Mac campaign that the world will never see. Don't ask for it. But the clients, again, I think it helped. JJ had worked with Wieden for 10 years. There was a trust there. So she came into the agency and said, you know what? This Big Mac, we don't think it's right. And we went, you know what? We also, we think you're right too. And we had a very honest conversation. It was 2 days before the world blew up, like March 2020. And we said, look, here's why we think some of these, Carl, our global CEO, talks about the first pancakes. The first pancakes you make are never the best ones. And we think, as we try to find the voice, we made some bad pancakes. Now, luckily for us, obviously not luck because the world went into COVID, that work never saw the light of day. And so we were able to correct those mistakes together. And by the time we started coming out of COVID, we'd found the voice, we were hitting the right notes, we were doing the work you mentioned, we did Travis. And so I think we've never really looked back
But
since then.
there's two versions of that conversation. There's the one where you get defensive because we presented it, we sold it, we made it, we paid for it, where you defend it. Or there was the one where you're like, shit, you're right. And it's not dissimilar to when in the early days when they said, we're not sure if you like the brand. Okay, we all loved the brand, but you don't feel it. So why argue?
It's a tricky, as most of my career has been client side, it is a tricky moment that because, you've put the brief in, it's 2 or 3 weeks, and as an agency, you've put love into it, you're really committed to it, and you've got a vision for where it's going to go. As a client, you see it for the first time, and you just go, I don't feel this. And you go, how do I break the news?
It's a tough spot.
It's a tough one, that.
That is a key part of the culture here as well. We talked about it at the start. It's the lack of fear. It's creating a culture where it's the fail harder that we have on a wall in Portland. And so, again, when they said we don't think it's good, the tendency isn't to defend it or you're going to get fired. The tendency is to go, yeah, you're right. We can be honest about it. We're not worried we're going to lose the account. There's no one above us in a holding company going, say yes at every time, defend the word, don't, and that leads to this kind of relationship and this kind of
you guys are prepared to go again, right, as well, and just keep going until you get there.
You get a lot of at-bats with McDonald's. You'll have another something else right around the corner.
Yeah, because there must be a lot going on. So so if you're a client listening in, what would your advice be to, so you've made some of the best work out there and, had a really successful run. And a lot of people are looking, I want to do what they're doing kind of thing. So what would your advice be to a client that's sitting there going, I want to create the environment for that kind of stuff to happen?
We get that question a lot actually from other brands. And I think one of the biggest things is actually be prepared to make the change. And as we talked about, like we blew our calendar to pieces. And much like working with an electrician, you ask like, well, I got this hole in the wall. Do you want me to fix this there? And it was at that point where we said like, let's build this calendar back with the brand in mind versus everything else doing it the way we've done it for years and years and years. And that took a lot of courage for a system like McDonald's to say, yes, let's reorganize all of this. It takes, if you want things to be differently, you have to really be willing to make some of those changes that happen outside of your department in completely different rooms that you're not in. You've got the right people to make those decisions for you, and you got to really do it. And then I do say like the trust that you build with your agency, you can't just say trust your agency because it's not always the case that they've got your best interests at heart. But you can build that trust and find little ways to do it. Find one way to win and then go from there.
It's funny actually. You reminded. I think from a client's point of view, it's helped me sell the work as well because behind every client there is a big organization. There's complexity. There's politics. There's operational things to consider. And I love how you've told the stories about how the franchisees or the fans really bought into it, or the staff in the restaurants. That is so key. And I think if you can think through your creative and how that rolls out in an organization and everyone's going to be part of it, I think that's, a big part of it, isn't it? So it's not kind of sat in isolation.
I was just going to add as well, to your question, you're a client, what do you do? Don't feel that, if you choose the agency with the most interesting creative idea, with the brave ideas, don't feel, okay, I've hired them, I've done the brave bit. Now, okay, hey, agency, here are my processes. I'm going to squeeze your work through everything that everyone else has ever done. I'm going to test it to death. I'm going to, we are difficult to work with. Oh, I probably can't say that. But because we will go out there and go, okay, you need to do this testing, but is it the right testing? Are you optimizing the work, or are you letting the testing make the decision for you? So use System 1. There you go. Shameless plug. But that's the thing, I've always liked working with you guys because it's about emotion. It's about getting versus some rational, metrics. And And therefore, you've got to be that client that is prepared to do stuff that makes you feel uncomfortable. And it makes the whole difference.
It's funny. Thank you for the call out, by the way. But we often say, we're not here to mark your homework. We're here to get good ideas made. And actually, it's really interesting that I've actually learned in the job that I do, I'm not actually selling advertising testing. What I'm selling is confidence. And it's the confidence to get the stakeholders to buy into your idea. Because often I remember when I was back in client-side roles, we'd have a meeting like this and I would be so inspired by the idea. And I'm relatively creative as clients go. So I could imagine, how exciting it could be. And then the next day, in the cold light of day in an industrial park on the edge of London, on some cold, frosty December morning, I'm there presenting the idea to the board and going, this doesn't sound quite as exciting as and they're not getting this. And they look at me and go, you want to do what? And actually what I realized with the System 1 test is it wasn't about the score per se. It was about giving the confidence to much more rational organization that are used to seeing, how much do we make yesterday? How much do we sell tomorrow? And, what's our forecasting like? It gives you the rational case for emotion effectively, So once I worked that out, I went, yeah, I can see that now.
Bring your agency in as well. Again, so many clients will be like, you'll present to marketing and then they'll do the job with the CEO, come back and go, no, he didn't like it or she didn't like it. But we get to present. Pretty soon we were presenting to the US CEO, global CEO. It's like, get them to present their ideas. Why are you trying to do that bit of the job?
And also as well, when you're in that situation, you can also find out why have you reacted the way you did. So if you presenting to the CEO, why have you reacted in that way? What is it? And you can work out whether it's just an executional response or whether actually the strategy doesn't work. You can unpick it and much more easy rather than translate it through the CMO. Yeah. That's very good. Well, we're running out of time, but just maybe to end with, is there anything you can share about what might be coming up next?
The only thing I will say is we are really far out on this brand. We get way ahead of it. And so we have, I would predict the stuff that we've already got on the calendar for next year will be the coolest stuff we've done to date. And I think it has everything to do with everything we've talked about that trust, that rhythm, and these, we're selling, we sell an idea internally with one slide, and then we add, and now we're bringing it to the brand, and they're like, yeah, let's just find the right place for it. So next year is going to be a really fun one.
Watch this space. Well, 2024 is going to be exciting.
And I was going to say, we talk a lot about culture and subcultures. So I can say without revealing too much, we played in certain spaces, streetwear, music. You're going to see some new ones next year as well. I think that's enough to say.
Good tease. Well, that's a brilliant place to end.
Yeah, let's cut his mic off now.
Yeah. You heard it here first. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for listening to The Uncensored CMO. I hope you enjoyed that. If you never want to miss an episode again, please do hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching on YouTube, click on subscribe there too. If you want to follow me, you can do. I'm over at John Evans on LinkedIn, or find me on Twitter as well, @UncensoredCMO. Thanks again for listening and watching. I'll see you next time.